once again at the home garage messing with Ursula. So fixed our wastegate issue a couple weeks back, put the bigger fuel pump in, and pretty much immediately started another project. So wanted to just totally sort out the wiring on the car. After I made the last repairs, the wideband just stopped working. So I kind of had to sit back and reevaluate just the whole state of our electrical system. We basically just spliced into a bunch of existing harnesses and stuff when we wired up everything pretty much. I mean, the Megasquirt has its own harness, the engine has its own harness, but we're getting power supply from the body harness just from splicing into other circuits that were already there. And there's just a lot going on here. And it looked like shit. It broke my heart every time I looked under the hood. See if I can dig up a picture from the archive of what it used to look like in the engine bay with this big, huge harness coming down this side by the strut tower that we had already busted open and split into. There was just wires everywhere. It was a huge mess. Now, right now, you can see it's still a huge mess, but that's what we're working on now. So here are the wires that I took out of the car. This came out of the car. This is the old harness, and I mean, there's a lot here. I didn't plan on this to be such a huge project, but I mean, this is how many wires we're gonna be working to eliminate. Look at this. So we're only needing a fraction of these, and the way we're going to be eliminating all of them, obviously there's some extra shit that we don't need that's in here that we just won't have anymore, like suspension height sensors and auto leveling sensors for the headlights, and there's a lot of that sort of stuff. But really, the lighting system is being hugely simplified. So previously we had little motors on the headlights that were auto leveling. We had lots of bulbs. Like, look how many bulbs are in here. Bulb. There's all these extra bulbs in here. We don't need all that shit. We need a headlight, a high beam, and a turn signal and a marker light. So that's what these black wires are here. We also have like the horn right there. So I want everything to still stay like street legal. So it needs to have wipers. It needs to have all the required lights for road use. So we are keeping all of that. But this is what I've got so far. Pretty simple process I'm using here. I just got my laptop over here, and I'm using it to look at schematics. And I'm looking up the schematics for everything and figuring out, these are all the connectors from the left-hand instrument panel fuse block. There's the connectors over there for the right hand. This little bridge in the middle is where things are crossing from one side to the other. So there's two fuse boxes, fuse, and then there's two relay boxes. One of them will be right here, which is actually sitting up on the car right there right now. The other one is right here. That's really just relays. There's not actually fuses in there. So there's lots of crisscrossing between circuits. There's lots of stuff that goes on the right and left side, like for the lighting and such. So we're gonna end up with like an H shape. Okay, and then we got this little connector here is going to go to the wipers, because I didn't actually access all those connectors. I just hacked the harness, so I didn't have to screw with all that. But in addition to that, we're gonna be adding some things. Like this circuit here is gonna be to command on the cooling fans from in the car, just from a manual switch. They will also still be wired up to our AC switch and radiator switch for normal fan function. So the fans will work automatically when needed, but then we'll have a switch to kick them on whenever we're sitting in the lanes with the engine off and we're just, in between rounds or whatever, trying to cool things off a little faster. So maybe we have like our attack signal, our starter wire. So our injectors and our coils, we're getting feed from that old shitty stock harness. So we got those in there. We're not gonna have a park range switch to bypass anymore. So really just tidying everything up. I've got a couple more circuits to add here. This is all just like notes that I took when I was looking at the diagrams to figure out a plan for doing all this. And this is kind of like each wire that I ran and what color it was and where it goes. So just kind of chipping through this. I only got a couple more things to go. You can see my little circled checks where everything got sorted. We need to get our fuel pump wired up. This was this crazy 3 relay system factory. We're not doing that anymore. We're gonna just have one relay. The Megasquirt's gonna control it. It's gonna be great. But also, I'm going to go ahead and wire in the provisions for a second staged fuel pump. So we'll be utilizing one of the existing relays that's already in the relay box over here on this side probably. So that it'll be controlled by just a hob switch that will be somewhere in like the intercooler piping. So whenever the hob switch sees like 4 PSI, it'll close, ground the relay, and we'll go ahead and run wires back to the fuel tank area so I can have dual fuel pumps in the tank. And the next project's gonna be to go through the whole fuel system, go big fat AN PTFE hoses from the tank all the way up, get a larger fuel pressure regulator that's probably not as cheap as this one. And then we'll have a real big fuel system that we won't have to upgrade probably ever again, honestly. So we're gonna go ahead and wire those provisions in so we don't have to like add, like lay wires on it when I'm done. But I've got this whole big box here full of like loom. This is like split loom, like a snakeskin type loom. This is some more snakeskin that's not split, but it like expands when you push on it. So you can see like whenever you wanna like cram a connector through it, you just kind of compress it and it widens up nicely. So we'll use that anywhere we can. And then I went kind of ham on the heat shrink. We got some pretty crazy heat shrink here. A whole bunch of it. Look at this. Gah. I was thinking like I'd probably wrap part of the harness in it like guys do with the DR25, which is just like a heat shrink that motorsports wiring applications often will just like run all these wires through heat shrink and then shrink it down, and it's got like a real nice clean look. But I'm not actually depinning all these little connectors. I'm just doing crimp connections to the existing like wires where they were shortened. I'm gonna be depinning and taking all this extra crap out. But I'm not actually depinning those. That would just take way too many resources, too much time to figure out what kind of pins I need to get, where I need to get them, where they all need to go. So in lieu of depinning and just doing all of that, I just am doing just crimp connections everywhere. So there's a lot of that, but it's a good, the style of crimp I use is very good, very reliable, so don't have any concerns with any of that. But got a couple more circuits to lay down, and then we'll be wrapping all of this, getting it all looking nice and clean. Actually, once I get all my circuits laid down, connect all my grounds, because lots of these circuits have just like open ground wires coming out of them. And that's because all of these grounds are going to meet up and then combine. These big fat ones are for our cooling fans. All these grounds are going to meet up in two central points. There's going to be one ground on this side of the engine bay that everything grounds to, and then there's going to be another one on that side. So just two big main grounds that all the lighting and fans and electrical stuff up in the front grounds to. We're going to be completely ditching our ECM. It's going to have zero function. It's not going to do anything for us. So that will be gone as well as like all the little lighting relays, headlight modules, and all that nonsense. This thing, something to do with headlights. But that's what I've been up to. So I'm gonna keep kind of plugging along with this. I got all my equipment on my workbench here. That's actually quite suitable for the level of work that takes place in this garage. But we're gonna keep plugging away, and as soon as I get it all in there for a test fit, plug everything in to see if it works, I'll kind of update and see how we did. So here's an update video for you on how the harness is going. I kind of already explained like the method I'm using, where I'm kind of, or I just cut a few inches away from the connectors. It's like I have some right here. So all the connectors that I thought I would need, I just cut like this off of the main harness once I got the harness out. Clean these up, figure out which wires I need. So really most of the circuits in the car are working the way that they were intended to, or the way that they were with the old harness. All I did was just put a wire from point A to point B so that whatever it was can continue working like it was. But that was not the case for everything. The fan control is changed up a little bit. The fans are only high speed now. I don't have a low speed anymore. I bypassed one of the relays, and I have the other two relays run off the same control. So each fan has its own relay, but they come on together. They have this, they share a signal. The signal is either, there's two signals, actually there will be three. One of them is in the AC switch, and one of my older videos I talked about how I got the AC to work in this car. The AC used to be controlled by the ECM. We don't have an ECM anymore to control the AC, so it's just controlled manually with a switch. As long as the pressure switch here is closed, then the AC compressor will come on. So anyway, that same switch also controls the fans. So anytime AC pressure gets high, the fans are going to come on high, both of them. Both relays will energize. Also, I'm still using the switch in the radiator. This is a great switch to utilize for standalone applications because that switch goes closed at like 203 degrees, no matter what. And it's on the hot side of the radiator. So if nothing else, I mean, it just to have your electric fans controlled in the simplest way, you would just want to have that switch in the radiator grounding your fan relays in the event that it gets to that temperature. And then bam, your fans work when you need them the most. Ideally, you might want to have a little more control than that. Obviously, if you have AC, then that's another story. you have to have fan operation to have AC anytime you're not driving, anytime the car is not moving. So anyway, had to change that up a bit. We got high speed only on the fans. On the fuel pump. So the fuel pump used to have a 3-relay system. Essentially, there was the EFI relay supplied power to the circuit opening relay, which really is the relay that supplied power to the fuel pump. But there was a 3rd relay called the fuel pump relay. This is very counterintuitive here. The fuel pump relay is, all the fuel pump relay does is either sends voltage, allows voltage to pass through it to go to the fuel pump, or it opens and forces voltage to go through a resistor that takes some of the voltage drop from the fuel pump. So in like really light load conditions, I guess it's just a way Toyota wanted to preserve the pump's life or make the pump last longer, is by using this resistor, which is normally mounted, I think, right here, somewhere on this tower. It's just a little 2-wire thing. If you don't want that function, one of the easiest things you could do is just cut those 2 wires, link them together. I would show you what it looks like, but I got rid of it a long time ago. But fuel pump resistor, I think is what it's called. They might have some fancy name for it, but anyway, it doesn't do shit. So the fuel pump relay, you just need to get rid of it because it's a trap, because it is a normally closed relay. It is the opposite of every other relay that you've ever seen. So don't try to use it, get rid of it. I'm utilizing one of the ABS relays for my secondary pump relay. So at some point in the very near future, I'm going to be using a Hobbs switch in the charge pipe or in the boosted side of the intake. And real simple, it sees a little bit of boost, sees like 4 pounds of boost, and it goes to ground, and that's going to command on that ABS relay, which is going to send power to our second staged pump. This is a pretty simple setup. My buddy Jason kind of told me about it. He introduced me to the idea. He's running it on his RX-7. And it's just so brilliant because you don't need computer control at all. Just as soon as there's boost, second pump kicks on. There's no programming, there's no tuning, there's no mess of wires. It's just one simple relay. So I love that idea. So we're going to be doing that soon. But anyway, so 2 fuel pump relays essentially is what we have. And then the lights are kind of complicated, mostly because of the goddamn DRL, okay? Daytime running lights are the stupidest thing you'll ever run into in automotive lighting because it's complicated. It has to be, because most of the time the daytime running lights are the high beam bulbs, but they're not on with full intensity because they're not supposed to like really light the road. They're just supposed to, I don't even know what, make your car look shiny during the day. I don't know what their purpose is. Say for fog, it's absolutely ridiculous that I had to go through the measures that I had to just have regular low beams, regular high beams. But anyway, long story short, I utilized a different relay that I was no longer using out of the main relay box to control my high beam relays. We're not using the DRL. The DRL relay is like this 8 or 12 wire, just super complicated relay, but it's really just like a little control mod. It's junk. It's gotta go. So anyway, that got super simple. The marker lights, I just teed off of the headlights because you don't need marker lights without headlights ever. So like this, you don't ever need that. So the fog lights are largely the same in operation. And so, so there was definitely some extra engineering that had to go into this. But it's coming along pretty well, and I'll show you some of my progress. But not all that glitters is gold here. I made some pretty critical mistakes that I'm kind of learning now that I'm trying to put it in the car. So hopefully you can learn from a couple of my little errors, and in your attempt to make a harness, whether it be a whole big engine harness like this is, or just a simple harness for the actual engine management systems, whatever, there's some things I did wrong. So I got the battery installed now. So a lot's going on around the battery. There's the harness. You can see, it's actually, I'm pretty proud of how you really can't see the harness. But here's the harness. So you can see my snakeskin all the way back here on the firewall. So it comes over here, it goes around, it goes under the battery, up to this fuse block, but also into the cab of the car in this corner way back here. And I preserved the grommet. I kind of trimmed it up, and I'm going to be using the same grommets passing through the firewall. I already got the grommet on this side. So this is where the trouble started. So like everything looks pretty good, but when I go to put the battery tray in, it occurs to me that this harness takes a pretty funny route from that relay box over to go across. Now the old harness went very low behind the engine. Under the intake manifold, it went under the booster and then up. It would be super difficult to route the harness the same way with the engine in the car. You'd almost have to pull the engine out. To get the old harness out, I cut it. I cut the whole big, thick bastard right about there, pulled this out, yanked it out this side. And man, it was hard to pull out because it's got little retainers back there that are just invisible and impossible to touch. Plus it's all like, when the harness gets old, man, I mean, it's like, these things don't bend, dude. It's really firm. So it was, getting the new one in the same place was an impossible, I was not willing to go down that road. So I'm like, it's fine. I'll just route it over the top. It's gonna be way skinnier than it was. It's not gonna be a big deal. Honestly, I think it looks great. The problem was for it to go down here, around, and all the way up and over, really took up a lot more slack than I expected it to. Also, going over the top of the booster rather than staying low and going under the booster. These two details made me come up very, very close to too short. I had to get kind of Western with the harness to make it. I mean, I was pulling here, pulling there, stretching the shit out of it. Just really putting all my joints to the test. I put a little bit of silicone coupler around the harness right there where it gets close to the downpipe. Just kind of protect it from the heat. But the next thing was, I realized that my connector is too short to reach this sensor. I mean, look how tight it is, like across the car. And so I'm like, oh, that looks like shit. So then I'm like, okay. So what I decided is I'm just gonna cut this connector off and extend the wires here. It's not a super critical component, so I don't think there's gonna be any detriment to adding a couple more crimped joints in there. But this wire was really the biggest stall out there. Everything else seems to be reaching pretty well. And so that looks pretty good. So kind of just going over like some of the materials that I used. A lot of this is old wiring that I did when I did the engine harness. Like this stuff. This is just harness wrapped in Tessa tape. Tessa tape's pretty cheap. It's really tough. It stays in place really well. It's way better than electrical tape in every way. It's more chafe proof. It stays on better. It's not a sticky, ugly mess. It's not all shiny and like a trash bag. So I like the Tessa tape a lot. It's done really good on the engine harness. This has been on there for over a year. I still had some of these connectors here, male and female, just little like eBay connectors. I think I paid like 20 bucks for like 10 of them. And so I used that there. The wipers, see like this harness, I didn't open up the cowl and access all the connectors to the wiper motor. So I just cut this and then I used one of these connectors here to connect to the wiper harness. So if I ever need to remove the harness, I don't have to take the cowl apart, which I don't expect to ever have to remove this harness. Can't imagine any reason why it would need servicing unless I screwed up. So this snakeskin stuff that I used here, it's split. So it just winds around. This is awesome, awesome stuff. Here's some more of it right here. You can get it in all different sizes. I got it from ProWire.com. It's not really cheap. I think I only got 10 feet of it because it was like $3 or $4 a foot. But it stays wound really well. You don't have to tape it up if you don't want to. It like holds its shape. It's abrasion resistant. It's pretty good stuff. I'm not sure how it'll hold up to heat, but probably not great just because of the material that it's made of. But that's really good stuff. Some other stuff that I used was just this, the same kind of stuff here, which is expanding. It's not split though. So you have to really know the length your wires need to be to slide your wires through it, but you can slide connectors through it because it gets all fat. So this is pretty awesome stuff too. Even if you already got your connectors wired in, a lot of times you can still slide it over. So that's what I use like on the ends with the connectors. And then just used a little bit of Tessa tape around the ends just to close it off, hold it still. And because cutting this stuff's kind of tough, you have to have some real good scissors. And so it'd be kind of frayed around the end. And yeah, that's pretty much the materials list. And then I just used like crimping lugs to crimp the wires together. I did the best I could on the fuse block connectors to depin the wires that are not used anymore. There was a bunch. I mean, I eliminated a ton of wires in this thing. Full disclosure, I would be doing a disservice to everyone watching this if I didn't say the proper way to do a harness this style. The way I did it is, it's easier, it's cheaper, it's more accessible, it's more serviceable. I love the split in that casing and the larger part of the harness because that allows me to access the inside of the harness. And one case in point of why that's great is I combined some other wires going through here that were already here. I had wires going down to my intake temp sensor that I'm running through here. And I got a ground that from down there that's coming up that I'm running through here. I just had to open it up and kind of stick them in there. I kind of got my nitrous solenoid going in there instead of just rolling over the strut tower. So I like that stuff a lot. Here's the thing. In harness building, the thing that everybody uses is called DR25. It is a heat shrink that doesn't have any adhesive in it. So it shrinks nice and smooth and evenly. And what they do, these guys who professionally build harnesses, and what you'll find if you order like a real high dollar harness from a company that makes engine harnesses, is they'll totally map out all their circuits. They'll have all their wire colors picked out. It'll be a full wire from terminal to terminal. There will not be any crimps generally or anything like that. The idea is to have a fresh wire from terminal to terminal, no soldered, no crimped crap in the middle, and they will feed it through this DR25, and they'll just keep feeding and feeding, and it's doable because they know exactly how long everything needs to be because this is what they do for a living. So using this type of shielding on it is generally going to be frowned upon, just like using like the corrugated crap from this stuff. So everyone starts out using something like this from like the parts store, and honestly it looks better than black tape. But that shit's garbage too. It just cracks, falls apart, it does terrible with heat. It looks like crap, it looks like some Chuck E. Cheese, Wish.com type shit. I don't like using that. I don't use that anymore, but I've been guilty of using it in the past. It looks better than just bare wires. So for the layman who are just doing a quick thing, it's fine. This stuff that I bought is kind of expensive, but I think it looks really good. And also it's very chafe resistant. So it's also gonna protect the wires. Some of the criticism you'll get with this stuff is that dirt and water can get in it, and that it's not heat resistant. So it certainly has its downfall. The DR25 is a great option if you're able to really map out the length of the wires. You can calculate every wire you're going to need ahead of time. It's just, if you can do all your homework to that extent, DR25 and a full wire from terminal to terminal is certainly the proper way to do this. I did not do new terminals because, frankly, I just didn't want to take the time to figure out every single different terminal that goes in every single different connector and source all of that crap. I don't really have the resources to identify terminals like that, to be quite honest. It'd be a great handy resource to have. So if there's like a manual or a website that's really good for identifying terminals like that, definitely drop it in the comments because I'd love to have that info. But so far so good. I'm gonna get these headlights in, get the rest of it plugged in, and start kind of working on tucking things a little more. And I think the finished product is gonna look very nice. See if we got lights. Oh, headlights, fog lights, marker light. Looks like everything's working. High beam. Yep. Turn signal. Turn signal, check. Well, let's try the wipers. Hey. Wipers work. Horn. Good. What else? Fans? Yep, fans are working, wideband's working, oil pressure switch. Cool, looks like everything is working so far. Let's see if our starter works. Yeah. Oh. All right, fuel pump's working, starter's working. We obviously have power to our injectors and our ignition coils and our mega squirt. So it looks like everything is working pretty good so far. Let's just see if our speedo's working. I was really worried about the speedometer. I ran all the wheel speed sensor circuits just to still have a speedometer. So we're gonna try that out now. Still no speedometer, man. Damn, I've really been fighting the speedo. Just not sure if we're ever gonna have a speedo again. That's real disappointing. All right, so I just got pretty much everything wrapped up on the Lexus. Took it for a little test drive tonight, and everything For the most part, it's working like it should. I have to figure out why my speedo's not working. I did wire in the front wheel speed sensors for that reason specifically, so my speedo would still work. I suspect there is a power distribution problem where I didn't feed voltage to somewhere where it belongs for ABS function. So that should be a pretty easy fix once I figure out exactly the circuit that we're dealing with. But everything else is working as it should. The car ran great all night. I think I'm pretty much gonna call the job a good one. Even managed to get Ursula's grill back on, baby. Now she looks like a whole car. Anyway, Ursula's electrical system is up to snuff now, ready to hit the track this spring. That's going to do it for this week, though. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Check in next week because I think we're going to be working on a big fuel system for Ursula. So we'll see you then.